This is Future Fork, a show that explores the world of food and the decisions we can make today that will shape our future. On the show, you'll hear from innovators in the food space. We'll have disruptive conversations with people from around the globe who are taking the lead on topics like food sustainability, ending world hunger, food security, and so much more. I'm your host, Paul Newnham. Today, we're chatting with Alice Zaslavsky, aka Alice in Frames. Alice is an award-winning author and personality at the ABC in Australia. Starting as a middle school teacher, she's worked to create a free digital toolkit for teachers called Phenomenom. This program is designed to tickle students' taste buds for learning and is used across schools to help kids understand food and culture better. In this episode, you'll hear how Alice's journey all began. Alice will share some of the insights she's learned from her teaching career, and we will also discuss some of Alice's tips and tricks to get people to eat more veg. Let's jump in. Alice, welcome to the show.
Paul Newnham, thank you for having me.
So before we dig in, where did the name Alice in Frames come from?
My name is Alice Zaslavsky. It is phonetic, but it's actually quite difficult for people to pronounce, let alone spell. So Alice in Frames became my moniker in 2012 when I came off Masterchef Australia and needed a social media handle. And I wear glasses, frames, like photo frames, love a pun. And it was actually my brother-in-law that said Alice in Frames because he's a musician. So, and it stuck.
I love it. So we're going to jump all over, but you started out as a middle school teacher. So can you tell us what that was like?
I loved teaching, and I still think I do teach, so I don't miss teaching. I don't miss the things that I loved. But when I was a teacher, so grade 5 to year 8, the thing that I found myself loving more and more was finding ways to integrate food into my lessons. So I was a English, history, geography and classics teacher, but I would be taking my classics kids to Stalactites, which is like a Melbourne institution Greek restaurant, to be like, we're talking Greek myths, but why not have some tzatziki? And over time, I realised that actually I wanted to make this more of a thing, and I had this food and culture elective in mind and in heart, and I needed to upskill in order to bring that to life. So that really kind of took me on a very organic journey that landed me right here talking to you 12 years later.
Amazing, amazing. So what was probably your favourite memory and learning from your time as a school teacher?
A few. It's kind of one of my more irky memories from teaching was when we'd take our year 8s on camps and they just didn't even know how to dice an onion. They were supposed to cook for themselves. So I found that very memorable because these are 13, 14-year-old kids that you're going to expect them to cook for themselves and look after themselves pretty quickly, but they just had no idea. So that's a memory that sticks out to me. And the other one is using, I was the Dep Head of Humanities. So a lot of my budget went to like Ancients Day where I had a lamb on a spit, all the kids dressed up, and their buy-in to have some lamb and to join the feast was to bring a dish of their own. And they brought a lot of grapes. Had to be like an ancient dish, a lot of bread, but it was the thought that counts.
And so you talked a little bit about moving into food. So as you've talked about teaching, you've talked about food. But what sparked this kind of shift from middle school teaching into where you are now?
Well, I mentioned that food and culture elective. In order to actually make that happen, I needed to get the skills to do it. So I signed up for a chef at home course at a local TAFE, William Angliss, and did that course every weekend for a whole year with a Michelin star chef. And the end of the course, they were bumping out the kitchen and they were bumping in Masterchef Australia auditions. And my heads of school liked the idea of a food and culture elective but didn't think I'd get the numbers. And so I figured I've got the skills now. If my kids see me on TV, they'll want to do my course, do my elective. So it was as simple and as difficult as that.
So it was a recruitment ploy.
It was a total recruitment ploy.
And so you signed up for Masterchef. What happened?
I signed up for Masterchef. I thought I didn't really think about how I'd do on the show. I knew my brother-in-law actually was the marketing manager at Angus at the time, and he said they're looking for people with personality who can cook, and they haven't found who they're looking for. So that's why I auditioned, and I did a lot better than I expected. I thought I'd last a few episodes, and I ended up leaving just before finals week. So that was, people use the very kind of, it feels like such a cliche to say, but that was a life-changing moment for me, sliding doors.
And then you brought together that kind of food conversation with the education background, and you developed a free digital toolkit. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, that's my food and culture elective.
Yeah.
That is.
So was that the elective?
That was bigger than I could ever imagine. So the elective that I was imagining was something for sort of 60 kids at a time. This is a toolkit that's in thousands of classrooms around Australia. It's available for free. It's funded by the growers of vegetables, fruits, seeds and nuts in Australia through a research and development levy that every piece of produce in Australia is charged, the small part of it is taken back and then reinvested into the industry. So Phenomenom with an M is upwards of $2.6 million of funding, and it means that there are no barriers to entry. And what we know from the research is that even if you ask teachers for a gold coin donation, that cuts out the bottom third of schools. So the digital toolkit is full to the brim with curriculum-aligned resources. It's got video, it's got podcast, it's got good mood wheel, so a movement wheel. What we know with kids, particularly sort of lower to middle primary, is that, well, actually all people need to move. So you kind of give them these brain breaks and you can get them into these interactive moments where they're moving through food. So it's just like little kind of, what we're trying to do is create little exposure points, because ultimately the food and culture elective that I was trying to create in the first place was just trying to connect kids with food. And this is the realisation of that to the exponential degree.
Have you heard any feedback from kids or teachers that have used this digital toolkit? Tell us an example.
Well, the advantage of having the investment from R&D is that we do need to be really rigorous in our testing. And what we've found is that 75% of teachers want to use the resource more, but that same proportion of kids are willing to try new vegetables as a result of using these resources in the classroom, because we know, particularly when trying new foods, kids take multiple exposures. But what do you do when there are no kitchens in the school, when access to fresh produce may be limited, and when parents don't want to risk buying something new if their kids aren't going to eat it? So this is exposure points without necessarily having to outlay any money. It's just time.
Amazing. No, it's so important and so critical for getting kids to eat more variety, I guess, and more plants in different ways.
Yeah. And here's the thing, Paul, like the reason why I knew the food and culture elective was going to work, I feel like I've said that like 50 times now. FNC, FCE. The food and culture elective was going to work is because every time I integrated food into my lessons, their engagement with English, with history, with geography went up. It's a mutually beneficial symbiotic relationship. So it's not just that they're more curious about food, they're more curious about these new angles of exploring these topics as well. And that could be done across the curriculum. I think often when we think about learning, we think about it, or food education in particular, we think about it in very concrete, linear ways. But there are ways that you could integrate learning about food across the curriculum, because food touches every part of our lives. So why not integrate that kind of learning and that kind of attitude into kids from a young age, so that they're not just thinking of food as fuel. They're recognizing that they are voting with their mouths. They're putting their money where their mouths every time that they eat, and they have the opportunity multiple times a day to make choices that can be a positive impact on the planet rather than taking. They're giving with those moments, and we can make that happen.
And you were talking about, I love the connection that you brought in there about food and culture. Tell us a little bit about your background in culture and how did that influence your approach to food?
Well, I was very lucky. I grew up in a family that's very food obsessed, I suppose. I was born in Georgia, the crossroads of Europe and Asia, in the 80s. So in sort of towards the last gasps of the Soviet Union. So you would think of that part of the world as being quite kind of bereft, empty shelves and ration tickets. But actually, Georgia was the fruit bowl of the Soviet Union. So the produce, the volcanic soils, Georgia's the birthplace of wine. So all of that was an innate and integral part of my childhood. Like I remember sitting outside and watching my grandfather at his dacha with persimmons in the garden and figs and pomegranates. He would make his own wine. My mum would make khachapuri, which is like Georgian cheese pie. If you've ever been to Georgia or to a Georgian restaurant, like all of these flavours. That was just the way that I grew up. So that, alongside my Jewish heritage as well, just meant that any time I walked into the house, it was, have you eaten? I know that that's a lot of kind of cultures have that kind of background, and it was always just an integrated conversation. And we were always that kind of family where you're sitting around at breakfast and you're talking about what you're going to have for dinner.
I like that kind of family. And so you've moved into food, you've written a number of books as well. So not only a digital toolkit.
Oh, that's just scratching the surface. I mean, I guess that's the thing.
That was the beginning.
Well, that wasn't even the beginning.
Wasn't the beginning?
No. So when I came off Masterchef in 2012, the first thing that happened was, so I came off just before finals week, and when you finish up, you kind of write, this is what I'm doing now. And I said, well, I'm writing a book about food for kids. And within weeks, I'd been contacted by a publisher of children's books, the publish Where's Wally and Maisie Walker Books or Candlewick Press in the UK. And the publisher said, I've loved watching your journey. How far into the book are you? And do you have a publisher? And I'm like, well, I've got this great idea for a book and no, I do not have a publisher. And that was 2015 that Alice's Food A to Z came out, and that was my first book. I say I wear a lot of frames. I also wear a lot of hats. So within those moments, you're kind of also thinking about how you can apply your unique set of skills. So I've been everything from food editor at a lifestyle glossy, restaurant critic, columnist. I've hosted a couple of shows as well. In fact, one of the shows came off the back of MasterChef too, because I was in an elimination and they basically said I had to use my immunity pin in order to be saved, but if I did, then my friend would have to go in my place. And that's not something that's within my values. And so I didn't use my pin, and I said, really, because what happened was I received some letters, that night, the night that I went home after they told me that, from my kids that I taught. And they said they're watching me, they're so happy for me and they hope that I win. And I knew that it was really important that I continued to teach them the values that I had been instilling within them in the classroom. And so I didn't use my pin. And the producers of this show, Kitchen Whiz, saw me do that, and they were looking for a new host of this show. And they thought, well, this is a person who clearly has the right message for children. So I did sort of 150 episodes of Kitchen Whiz, went into another show, and let alone, all the other sort of opportunities that have come my way. These days, I wear slightly fewer hats, but still kind of keep my finger in multiple pies, so to speak, pun always intended. So I'm the food guru at the ABC, at the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, which means across radio and ABC News Breakfast, which is the breakfast program for Australians. I've also got my own radio show on a Saturday morning. I wake up the people of Melbourne.
Very early.
Very early, but I love it because it's a real privilege, and I get to set the tone of the conversation. And I think that's what it all comes back to, is that I do feel like I'm still a teacher and I'm still kind of cultivating curiosity in people, because you never stop learning. You never stop being a teacher. That, you can leave the classroom, but the classroom never leaves you.
And so you've had a couple more books come out?
Just a few.
Yes.
Yeah. So since Alice's Food A to Z, my biggest release was in 2020, at the end of 2020, peak pandemic. I published a little book called In Praise of Veg. Not so little, it's 2 kilograms worth of book, a colour-coded book about vegetables, thank you. And it's now in 15 different countries, 7 different languages and counting. And the thing that I think that book is, really, it's a textbook, and it's off the back of Phenomenom, because it's one thing that kids come home, 3/4 of those kids want to try a new vegetable. But what I realised through that process is it's the parents that don't know how to cook those ingredients. So what I really found was that I needed to arm the parents with the tools so that when you lead the horse to water, the drinking water is delicious enough for them to come back.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what were some of in that book, because it is a pretty amazing book, and there was a lot of interesting learnings from that, because it's organized in different ways. It's like...
Well, I think number one, having been a teacher, I'm always thinking UX, like how do I make this really user-friendly for the user rather than just sort of aesthetically pleasing? And what we know is that people don't even know what vegetables are called. So you could say cook with fennel, but if somebody doesn't actually know what a fennel is, and you know this, like people tell me all the time, I go to the supermarket, I put the fennel down and the 15-year-old behind the counter says, what's this again? So I needed to make it as accessible for people as possible, and I just didn't realise how useful it is. I even use that colour coding tool myself. And then really it's just been a matter of identifying how else I can add value. So Better Cooking was my next book. And that really is like my permission slip for people to say, get that big, pretty book off the shelf and actually use it, because you're a better cook than you think you are.
And for those who haven't seen the book, I mean, it's amazing because you can pick it up and look at the yellow section or the orange section and be able to go and find these vegetables there in these dishes, and then have a really nice, beautiful way of bringing them together. And I think this is really key to help people eat more veg.
I think so too. And even just celebrating vegetables. So what I did as part of the book is I've also had the opportunity to host a lot of live in conversations and meet a lot of chefs from all around the world. And so I included them in the conversation. I got quotes from everyone from Jose Andres to some real, favourites from Australia. Like Josh Nyland's got a quote in there about a vegetable that to him tastes like briny sort of seafood. So, of course, he's going to use that. So what I think that book has done is it's captured the zeitgeist, because people know they should eat more vegetables. But the issue is that if you come to them saying eat it because it's good for you or eat it because you have to, that lever is not strong enough to push. It's like we need to rebrand veg to make it something that people want to eat rather than have to eat.
Yeah, absolutely. So many things in such a short life. What's coming up next for you, and what do you really want to work on in this next stage of life?
I think the number one thing, actually, Paul, you would resonate with this as well, is trying to find a sustainable pace at which to maintain momentum, because I am a very impatient person and I want everything to happen right now. And if there's anything that I've learnt in the past 12 years, it's that good things take time. And if you rush them, then the foundations are brittle. Whereas if you just do the work and ask for the things that you want, explicitly, and then work towards them, the sky's the limit, And the only difference between those who talk about doing the thing and those doing the thing is that those doing the thing just go ahead and do it. And then they sort of perfect it along the way. So the next stage of life, I've got another book coming out in October, which really actually builds on what in Praise of Veg has taught people to do and makes it really practical for the home. And that's coming out in Australia and the UK, and then later in North America next year. Oh, and in the people in the Netherlands love vegetables. It is wild. And Germany too.
I think the Netherlands is the second largest food producer in the world.
And they've got such fantastic attitudes when it comes to, the way that they think about green spaces and all of those things. And the best kitchenware shops. When I went over there on my book tour, I genuinely had to be supervised at all times because I brought back so many gadgets. I loved it. And then obviously some media projects that I'm looking forward to talking to you about next time that we interact. Paul.
Sounds good. Absolutely. And one question I'd love to always bring up in any conversation is, what are you loving to eat at the moment?
I am loving autumn fruit. We're really fortunate to be in that sort of shoulder season in Australia where we've got everything from, actually all those fruits that my dedushka grew in Georgia. So persimmons, figs, pomegranates, quinces, apples. There's a pink fleshed apple that I'm really loving at the moment, which is really fun and tangy. I'm loving eating new things with my 5-year-old. She is the realisation, I think, of all of the things that all the learnings that my husband and I picked up as a result of Phenomenom, just recognising that actually it's the less that you say, the more that they're likely to taste it. So put it in front of them and then just watch because it's very entertaining. It's very entertaining regardless. But she's just really harnessed the way that we think about food, and she's just a little sponge.
What she taught you in that?
Well, the number one thing she taught me when she was a baby actually is, people say, oh, I gave it to my kid, but I gave it to my baby and they threw it on the ground, so I'm not going to give it to them again. She taught me that is just her being a little scientist. Kids are little scientists and they experiment. And so when she throws food on the ground, which she doesn't do now, but when she was a toddler, she's just seeing what happens when it drops on the ground. It's not that she's rejecting it. And I think that parents and caregivers attach a lot of pressure and put a lot of pressure on themselves and create a lot of attachments to the child eating the food. But it's a long process. It's like basically inviting an alien over for dinner and saying, here, eat all these weird, squelchy, different coloured things. Of course they're going to want to pick it up and smell it and look at it and all of those things before they put it into their mouths. So watching that beyond just anecdotal but like empirically, watching this process has just been so illuminating.
That's amazing. Well, thank you for joining us on the show.
Congratulations on the show, Paul. It's awesome.
Thank you. You've been listening to Future Fork, a show that explores the world of food and the decisions we can make today that will shape our future. Future Fork is produced by Disruptive Consulting Solutions and supports the SDG2 Advocacy Hub. For more info, head to the website futureforkpodcast.com. This show was produced with strategy and production support from Wavelength Creative. So you don't miss an episode of Future Fork, make sure to subscribe to or follow the show in your podcast app. And while you're there, leave us a 5-star review. It really helps others find the show. I'm Paul Newnham, and I'll see you in the next episode.